there's a part of me that doesn't feel like I should be up here. I feel inadequate. But I know that God has done things in my life that I can't explain, that changed my heart in ways that it's hard to put into words. And John said to me, to speak on faith without works is dead. And initially I couldn't even think of what that meant. After pondering on it for a week or so, I know that today, God has a plan for me. And if I'm trusting in that plan, there's certain things that my actions will show, that, I'm not trying to control the outcomes in my life. I'm accepting you where you're at. I'm loving people, all people, not just the ones I want to. It's showing up in the world in a different way, and that wasn't always me. I don't even understand it at times, really. And I think that's just part of it, right? I'm not meant to understand God. He has a plan that is bigger than any of the outcomes that I could think of or want or desire. And I believe that today. I really do believe that today. John asked me to share a bit about, where I was at and how I got to where my addiction took me, and, how this SOS began. I'm not going to share a lot about my addiction. I'm going to start off, it's important that I mention that the trauma I went through as a child was being sexually abused at 9 years old by a friend of the family. It had me needing to escape my reality, and that, that started off with living in a fantasy world, making up big lies so everybody, trying to make everybody like me because I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere, and then into my early teens, it became pot and marijuana. At 18, it was cocaine. And, I struggled on and off with that for many years. In my 30s, getting sober, relapsing. But during those times, I was always chasing something outside myself to be okay. Whether that be relationships, money, jobs, anything, my God and my understanding back then was a bunch of spiritual principles. I was in a 12-step fellowship, a bunch of spiritual principles. God wouldn't give me any more than I can handle, but I didn't pray. I didn't have a relationship with that God, So in my 40s, after coming back here to Ottawa, I went to a few meetings. It wasn't the same, and I stopped going to meetings, and I spent the next 12 years in active addiction. Struggling on and off with work and jobs, and the last 2.5 years of my active addiction was spent homeless. A year and a half in Brockville, and a year here in Ottawa. During those times, I suffered in ways that I wouldn't wish on anybody. I had MRSA, these huge festering sores all over my legs for 3 months as I walked around the city completely filthy, complete derelict. In an opioid, I became an IV drug user at 48 years old, and I found opiates at 49. And that was a different trip. I needed that drug every day. It was a cycle that I could not break, I couldn't get out of, and it caused me to become homeless. So I suffered with MRSA. I had cellulitis. My legs swelled up twice their size. I walked around with that. I could barely walk for 3 months. A doctor bought my prescription so I could get, the antibiotics. Overdosed from fentanyl 30 times. Sometimes I was by myself and I wake up in the hospital. Like, if I look back, God's been with me the whole time. But I didn't believe that. I felt like I had to do all these things. And it wasn't until that last week when I was on the street, this Thursday, it'll be 2 years from when, so 2 years ago. 2 years ago today was probably around the day that I said a prayer, God, take me or save me, because I was 145 pounds. I couldn't walk. It was minus 15 to minus 20. I was sleeping on Rideau Street for those last 10 days, day and night. I could barely walk. I hadn't eaten in a week. I hadn't drank any water in 3 days. And I knew I wasn't going to live much longer. And I said this prayer, God, take me or save me. And I got a housing worker, and that housing worker, bank machine had taken my bank card, and everything had been stolen. I had nothing. I had nothing and nobody. Absolutely nothing. This housing worker, my first meeting with him, we went to the bank to try and get money out, but I'm a complete derelict. I'm filthy, dirty. I'm like, it was horrible. And they wouldn't give me any money. They just looked at me like I was crazy, because I pretty much was. I looked the part. We left there, and I remember looking down at his phone, and I asked to borrow his phone. I called my sister, and she had come out and found me a couple times on the street, walking Rideau Street, found me, give me some gift cards, and leave, because they didn't know what to do anymore, And I said, will you come and get me? And she came and picked me up, and she took me back to her house. I slept on her basement floor for 3 days. I barely moved. I barely ate anything. I barely drank anything. She thought, she's a nurse, and thought she was going to have to take me to the hospital at one point. They got me into detox. I was there 7 days. Billy Buffett for 7 weeks. And it took me being 5 weeks sober before I was strong enough to stand and cook a meal with my partner at Billy Buffett. And then I went to Jericho Road. And, at Jericho Road, we would come here to Union City Church, and, we did morning devos every day. It's a Christian 12-step fellowship. I worked a Big Book Awakening Step Study by 6 months sober. And, I remember doing those devos, and I would just write down whatever. Because even though I prayed in that street, I didn't believe. I had doubts, like, who's Jesus? Who followed him around? Who wrote this book? How many times has it been translated? These are all questions. I'm like, doubts. And then Vicky was standing up here doing what I'm doing today one day, and she said, she shared that she had doubts. And she said, all you have to do is love Jesus. I went, okay, maybe I can do that. That sounds pretty easy. That day, the song come on. It said something about dying and coming back to life. I pictured myself getting up off the street and walking with my sister that day off the street. And the room got brighter. And when I went back to Jericho and I started doing those devos, it was 5 days after, doing them. And a staff member came in and he goes, is this you? That day I know the Holy Spirit came into me, opened me up just a little bit. The next thing that happened was at the Adam Christians Men's Retreat. And they had a thing that happened at night where you went to the bonfire and you wrote something on a piece of paper and you nailed it to the cross and then you threw it in the fire. And, I'm seeing all these people around me throwing their hands up to praise Jesus. And I'm like, that's what I want, God. I want to be filled up like that. And I prayed there, and what I heard was, I've been walking with you for a long time. Or no, I've been with you for a long time, and I'm walking beside you in everything you do today. And I also met a guy there who, he didn't tell me this at first, but we're in a triad, and we're meeting together, and I'm sharing with him my story about being a homeless drug addict, and this guy is 6 years into his Christian walk, and he heard from Jesus that weekend that I was an assignment for him, and he didn't know how he could help because he knew nothing about addicts and he knew nothing about homelessness. But you know what? That was him putting the works in, because he stayed true to that. He helped me in ways that he didn't have to, many ways. He loved me until I could love myself. And there's so many people in my life that did that. There's still days I feel unworthy. I think that, these things with SOS, I hate sitting behind a computer, and I got all these things I got to do. And then I'm like, you know what? This is God's plan. It'll happen when it's happened. I just need to get up. I need to do it. How SOS got started was, I was about to graduate Jericho Road. Rick Agello over here has his own ministry. He goes out once a week, takes a wagon and goes out to the street. And I asked if I could go out with him. And he said, "You sure you're going to be okay out there?" Well, 4 months into Jericho, I was already taking guys from Jericho. We were going downtown. We were talking to the homeless. I was buying people coffee, and I don't even know why I was doing it. I just knew how I felt when I was on the street. I knew that suffering that I went through, and if I could help somebody's day get a little better, that's what I wanted to do, So with the conditions Rick had, I guess I qualified, and he took me out with him. And I would bring a hockey bag full of clothes, and he would take his wagon, and we start going around the streets. And we did that a bunch of times. And then John and Vicky came to me, and I offered a wagon, which I believe was donated by Dave and Savannah. And I was at Jericho Road. I had clothes in a spare bedroom, and I made sandwiches, and I'd spend my last $60 to buy stuff to make sandwiches, and I just did that because I wanted to go out there and help. That wasn't me an act of addiction. An act of addiction, I was a consumer. What could I get from you? How could I manipulate you? How could I take? And that's what it was all about, because I needed to support my addiction, and I knew no different. But through this series of events, that happened in recovery, and at these people being put in my life, the place I'm living, the cars I was driving, getting my family back in my life, my daughter, all these things happening. I didn't go looking for any of them. It was just God going, trust me, trust me, trust me, And so I kept going out every week, and eventually, I was out there with 2 wagons at some time with a hockey bag of clothes on each wagon in the middle of winter last year by myself. And I didn't care. I just wanted to help. Ashley's been coming out since last winter. She was one of the first people to come out. There's a lot of, how many people in this room have been out to do volunteer without? Yeah. And how many other people have donated clothes and stuff like that? I had nothing to do with that. It's all God. God changed my heart. Put the people in my life, I don't even understand it most days. But I just kept showing up. I had faith that God had a plan. Eventually, and this has been progressive. It didn't happen all at once. But as God kept showing me to trust him, I just keep showing up, and God, the results are up to him. So since then, in the summertime, we've had as many as 26 volunteers come out. We've got guys in treatment right now. We've helped others. We hear about others on the street that are being that are sober as a result of us going out every week and them seeing us, and we're talking about recovery, and that's God. God's done all this. If I start taking the credit for it, you're going to be coming out doing outreach to me. I'm going to be back out there. And I need to, it's really taught me to accept people where they're at, meet them where they're at and not judge. If I'm judging, I'm not living in God's will. I'm living in my will, October 2nd, when John came, had talked to me about partnering with the church and making this a full-time ministry. I didn't know, there was part of me that thought he was crazy. I'm 20 months sober, but obviously he sees in me what I don't. And, I'm It's never felt like work to go out to the street. It's never felt like work to go to the storage unit for 4 hours and organize stuff. It's never felt like work to make sandwiches. Okay, it feels like work to get behind the computer sometimes, but, and I see how it's helping others. It's like bookends. We're helping people on the street. We're connecting with over 600 people every month. And, John brought up a good point the one time where we talk recovery to people, and if we're getting a no, it's still a positive thing, because how many times did I say no before I said yes? We're praying for people out there. We're bringing people out, the volunteers that are coming out that don't believe in Jesus, don't believe in God, and we're praying as a group before we start. They're seeing us pray on the street, and they're getting curious as to, I don't know. God knows I don't. The other side of it is all these people in recovery coming out and getting together, and I get told so many times that it's helping them in their recovery, helping them to stay sober, giving them a purpose and direction. If you would have told me this is what was going to happen when I was laying on the street 2 years ago, I would have laughed in your face, I didn't think I was going to live. I didn't know a way out. God provided that way, and he keeps providing a way, and he keeps showing up in my life in ways that, I met my biological family a little less than 2 months ago and had Christmas with them. Two full brothers, a full sister. I had Christmas with my daughter and my 2 grandkids this year. Like, I was out of her life for 9 years. I didn't even go approach them. Rich Danby bought me an Ancestry.com kit. That's God working through him. Megan asked me if I had any kids, and I accidentally liked my daughter's picture, showing her on Facebook. The next day, that night here at Ashes to Rubies, she Facebook friended me. The next day, her mother Facebook friended me. I met her that afternoon. Within a week or two, I was talking to my daughter, and then that's how that started. I didn't go looking for it. God did. God did all that. The place, the car, vehicles I was driving. I graduate Jericho Road. I'm thinking, it'd be nice to have a vehicle. I get a WSIB check, a top-up check, and all of a sudden I graduate. A week later, WSIB throws $3,700 in my account and says they screwed up the cost of living over the last number of years. And I'm like, cool, I can get a car. I write that car off 3 weeks later. I call my friend Rich. I met at the Adams Men's Retreat. I'm like, I'm supposed to move to Manotick, and he's like, I guess I'm flipping this Dodge Journey for a reason. You know what? He insured that car. He safety it. He put it in my name, nothing in writing. And here you go. I knew him 3 months. I just show up. God does the rest. And, I trust in that process today. I trust that if I do certain things, if I'm a good person, if I take time out for that person, especially when I don't want to, that's when I have to do it. When I don't want to do something, I have to do it if I know it's the right thing to do. I'm not perfect. I screw up all the time. I take my will back, But I'm grateful for the life I have today, and I'm grateful for the people I have in my life today, and I'm grateful that I'm growing this relationship with God that can solve all my problems. I don't understand it. Most days I don't understand it, and I don't think I'm meant to. So, thanks.